And one of the more controversial things that I guess talked about, controversial, not really in my opinion, but it was the fact that I like to spend Bitcoin when I can, right? So if Steak and Shake is selling burgers for Bitcoin, I'll buy in Bitcoin because they're accepting Bitcoin. You know what I mean? And I got a lot of pushback for that. All right. What was the pushback I was hearing? Some people were saying, well, you shouldn't spend your Bitcoin because it's going to go up in value and you're wasting money because you bought burgers instead of holding it. Some people will say, well, what if you're up on your Bitcoin? You're going to have a taxable event because you sent the Bitcoin for a good or service and that had appreciated in value. So there's that. There's some people who are going to say, well, again, just harping on the fact that imagine if you were spending Bitcoin back when it was only a couple dollars, you'd be in the same situation because you're getting rid of so much value by buying a burger instead of holding it, and stuff like that. So my real response to that is Bitcoin is money. Don't forget that. We understand hodling, hold on for dear life, right? We understand hodling Bitcoin for long time periods, right? But Bitcoin is money, and money is meant to be spent, and it's meant to elevate your lifestyle, right? It's meant to make sure that you're comfortable. It's meant to give you options. It's meant to open doors for you. And that's what Bitcoin does for all of us after a certain amount of time, right? Now, I'm not saying to go spend all your Bitcoin immediately. And by the way, spending your Bitcoin is not the same as selling it, right? Some people sell their Bitcoin back to dollars, then just hold the dollars for a long time, right? Because they think the price will go down and I'll buy in cheaper. Don't do that. All right. You are not an experienced trader. And even if you are, that's still dumb. That usually doesn't work. Most traders are not profitable. So definitely don't do that. But there's a difference between selling it like that and then using it to buy a good or service. So first off, if Steak and Shake wants to accept my Bitcoin, that's great. That's another step towards what we all want, which is Bitcoin as global money, right? You want to be able to go anywhere and buy something with Bitcoin, right? It all starts somewhere. Someone has to take that leap and start the Bitcoin circular economy, So you can't just expect these things to just happen for you. You have to actually be part of the movement in order for that to go down. If someone's selling a house for half of a Bitcoin, that's a big milestone. You're probably going to want to take them up on the offer because they might be refusing to sell in dollars. There's going to come a point where people refuse to take your dollars. So that's a whole other thing. But yeah, if a company is saying that they accept Bitcoin, I want to give them the Bitcoin because one, I care about using money. And two, I also want to reward Steak and Shake for making a good financial decision. They decided to accept hard money at their establishment, and I want to show them the economic impact of doing that. So when I would usually go to Shake Shack, or maybe I would go to Habit Burger, or maybe I would go to McDonald's, or maybe I'd go somewhere, I'm deciding, you know what, I'm actually going to go to Steak and Shake instead of In-N-Out because they accept Bitcoin. Right. And now the economic inflow into their business in the form of Bitcoin is showing them a strong signal. And that signal is that Bitcoiners have capital and they're ready to deploy it. Right. We're making a good decision here. We need to double down on this decision. We need to add the Bitcoin burger to the menu. We're adding new menu items, blah, 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 whatever they want to do. You know what I mean? And you're just sending that positive signal to them, right? Because here's the truth, and here's the last thing I'll say about it for now. The absolute truth is if Steak and Shake continues to double down on their Bitcoin acquisition strategy, and let's just say McDonald's, which is way bigger than Steak and Shake, if McDonald's decides that they will never, ever, ever, ever buy Bitcoin, never hold it, never accept it, never endorse it, McDonald's will go out of business and Steak and Shake will take all of their locations. It'll take all of their customers. It'll take all their everything. My guy just left the video again. It'll take all of their stuff. Steak and Shake will completely take over. Now, that might sound crazy to you because you say, oh, well, McDonald's has the best real estate and there's too many of them and it's a global brand and it's way more recognizable. It doesn't matter. Over time, every McDonald's will go out of business or they will just get acquired by Steak and Shake because the company will not be profitable enough. They will not be able to keep up with inflation. Okay. Their profit margins will not be big enough. All right. The amount that they have to pay their employees because the minimum wage or whatever it is going to keep going up as well. They won't be able to keep up. Steak and Shake will just take over their entire business model and crush them. All right. It'll be like how Amazon crushed hundreds and thousands of businesses in order to get to the scale that they're at. McDonald's will just get crushed. They'll just be a statistic. And that's true for every single company, right? Because if you're storing all your value in dollars or in US treasuries or dollar instruments, you're going to continue losing value because they can continue to be diluted, right? When you are storing your value in Bitcoin, which can't be printed or diluted, you are not only storing your value, but you're actually gaining value relative to all of your dollar competitors, all of your fiat denominated competitors. They cannot keep up with you. In the long run,
100%.
I'm talking like 25, 35 years from now,
Yeah.
if McDonald's does not have any Bitcoin on their balance sheet and Steak and Shake has thousands of Bitcoin on their balance sheet, they will
Hmm.
literally destroy McDonald's and they will slowly eat them and acquire all their customers, all their real estate, and all their money. And they'll
That's a
probably sell
great
a better
take.
product on top of that.
That's a
Because I
great
ain't gonna
take.
get no McDouble, right? Compared to getting like the burger at Steak and Shake. The quality's way different, you know? But it
They
is what it
can't
is.
handle the truth.
That's also true, like I said, for any S&P 500 company. Strategy went from barely in the Russell 2000 to now being like the number 86th ranked company by market cap. And that happened in 4 years. You know what I mean? So there is a strategy at play here, pun intended. Metaplanet, same thing. Basically, number one stock in Japan. Similar Scientific, zombie medical company that's coming back from the grave. A lot of companies are going to start adopting this strategy because it just makes sense. You know, why would you continue to hold dollars when you're losing money? And why would you not hold Bitcoin when you could just gain value? You know what I mean? Doing anything other than that, it's just not rational. You know, if you're rational and you care about your company and you want to see it be around for the next 10, 20 years, then yeah, you're going to want to get on a Bitcoin standard. You really don't have a
Excellent.
choice in the matter. And that's the thing about Bitcoin. It's going to be adopted like gunpowder, right? In the words of Saifedean Ammous, the
Yeah.
author of the Bitcoin standard. You can either just go ahead, buy it now while you have the chance, while it's cheap. 100,000 is very cheap, by the way. You can buy it while it's cheap and then be happy in the future, or you can continue to act like this is something that's just going to go away for some reason, and then you can just be sad about it, you know? So really, it is what it is.
Yeah, for sure. And when you say that Bitcoin is, I mean, when you say McDonald's is going to go out of business, that's why we're here discussing these things, talking about these things. But once you see it, you can't unsee it, right?
Mhm.
Once you see it, like, and it touches everything. We're not just talking about banks and financial institutions. We're talking about everything, all the way down from the country, state, to the nation state, to the governments, to the city governments, to your personal household income, to your family offices, down to the individual. And that includes the companies, right? If you don't adopt this, you're going to, it's basically adopt Bitcoin or die. And that's such a wild thing to say, right?
Right.
But you broke that down.
Yes, sir. Thank you, man. And to put it another way, if you didn't adopt the
Mhm,
internet as a company, you went to zero. Facts. You know what I mean? Like if you don't
mhm,
have a website, if you don't have an app,
mhm.
if you don't have any way that people can connect
Right,
to you on social media or whatever,
right.
if you have
Yeah.
no connection to the internet and you're a business, you
Mhm,
are not going to make it. You're going to go to zero, or you're just going to stay
yeah,
a very, very small local mom and pop, not even serious business. It is what it is.
yeah.
Like, yeah, so that's major. You know what I mean? They do a lot of advertising online. You know, they allow you to order online. You know what I mean? Like these are all really
Mhm,
important pieces of their infrastructure. And if you were to remove that, especially in the earlier days, then their ability
mhm.
to scale just would not have been there, right? And again, they would
Yeah,
have been
Burger King would
destroyed
be
by
number
someone
one.
who was on the internet. So if your business is not connected to the internet in some way, shape, or form so that you can connect with business partners in order to figure out leasing or franchising or the construction or the setup or the logistics or the ordering of the
Mhm,
food or whatever it is, you're just not going to make it. You know, and end of
mhm.
the story. So it's a similar situation where if you're not on a Bitcoin standard, you're just not going to make it. And if that sounds too ridiculous to believe, at the end of the day, time will tell. That's the thing about Bitcoin. Sometimes you just have to wait for the truth to reveal itself. And us saying it in the present doesn't really mean much because who are we?
Right.
We're just randoms. But eventually you'll look back and you'll say, "Oh wow, that kid on the internet, I guess he might have been
Mhm,
onto something." But by
mhm.
then, it's a little bit too late. You know what I mean? So it's up to you. You have to do your own research and come to the conclusion for yourself. But I am here telling you essentially the way I see things based on what I know. I would say the biggest thing is that the big guys with a infinite amount of money are here. Countries
Mhm.
technically have an infinite amount of money. technically. Businesses, they have a nearly infinite amount of money depending on the size and scale of the business. Businesses like Meta, like Apple, right? These guys are coming, right? The banks like Cantor Fitzgerald, like asset managers like BlackRock, right? These guys are already here, and they have so much money. The scale that they're able to buy at is ridiculous, and they're not really too focused on the price. They're indifferent
Mm-hmm.
to the price. So
Mm-hmm.
individuals care a lot about the price. They're like, it's 120,000. I can't really buy that. Again, you don't have to buy an entire Bitcoin all at once. Otherwise, I would own none. Right? I can't buy something that's $120,000 instantly. So anyway, individuals, are very price sensitive. If they see the price up and it's 150,000, they might be a little antsy about getting in. Or if they see it down to 98,000, they might be very sad, depending on when they bought in or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. Institutions, countries, they don't really care what the price is because the price doesn't matter. They don't look at the price tag when they go shopping. You know what I mean? Like, they
Right.
don't really need to see the receipt or the total. They just go ahead, swipe the card. It's gonna clear. And that's basically how they're eyeing Bitcoin. So in the situation we find ourselves in, we now have these big players in the space that probably aren't going to sell for a very, very long time, and they don't really care about the price. So what does that mean for us, and what should we be doing? At least I am going to be continuing to dollar cost average, or DCA, into Bitcoin. I always buy a certain amount every single day, and I'm not going to stop. If anything, my buys are going to ramp up, because I know there's going to come a point that my little $100 that I might buy is going to buy me less Bitcoin because it costs more. Right? The price of all assets is going to continue to increase. All right. The government is in a little bit of a tight situation. The deficit's getting higher, inflation's getting out of control. They have to pay back all this debt, and the only option that they really have is to print more money. Right? The government is kind of like someone who's bad with money, and they use credit cards to try to make up for it. Right? They got one credit card that's maxed out. The monthly payment is due, and they're charging interest on it. So what do? They get another credit card. They open a new line, and then they pay out that old one. So really, they're just kicking the can down the road. The government can afford to do that. Individuals really can't. Eventually, it catches up with you, and you end up either defaulting and losing your credit score, or you got to pay a bunch of money up front and try to come up with it. And the government's playing that same game. They're acting like they can't default, but instead of defaulting, what they do is they just debase the money and make everything more expensive for us, right? When they print money, they make everything more expensive for us. That includes food, that includes your clothing, but it also includes assets like a car, like a house, like gold, and like Bitcoin, like the stock market, right? So that's why stocks only go up. That's why housing prices typically only go up. That's why the price of stuff only goes up. It's because the thing that you're buying the stuff with is actually losing value. So back in the day, it would cost one piece of paper to buy a Bitcoin. That's $1 for a Bitcoin. Now it costs 100,000 pieces of paper to buy Bitcoin. Bitcoin
Mm-hmm.
hasn't really changed. It's the same thing, 16 years
Right.
running. But really what's happened, the
Right.
dollar just sucks. And because of that,
Mm-hmm.
you're not able to buy as much stuff with the same piece of paper. So I'm getting in a position where I want to make sure I have as much Bitcoin right now as I can, while my paper dollar buys more, because it's going to buy less in the future. So I want to make sure that I'm positioning myself for where the puck is going, right? In hockey terms, where's
Right.
the puck going? All right. The puck is
Right.
going towards
Gretzky.
Bitcoin. I want to be in the puck. I want to be where the puck is going, not where it's at. So I'm trying to get ahead of the curve by having as much of my
Mm-hmm.
net worth in Bitcoin as possible.